Hello there everyone, my name is David Lutchford and welcome to Lesson 16 of my Ancient Greek course. Lesson 16 is on negatives, and in particular we are looking at the word ou. And now there are three forms of the word ou which you can see on screen. It's the same word but with three different forms, and these are ou, ook and ouch. And this word, ou, ook, ouch, means not. It can mean something else, which we shall look at later in the video, but the meaning that we are focusing on now is not. And the reason we're looking at this is because so far in this course, we've only looked at positive sentences. That is, sentences where something is affirmed to be happening. So, for example, the man is running, rather than, for example, the man is not running. And today we are going to learn how to say that things are not happening. And we shall do that using the word ou, which may also be found as ook or ouch. So let's start by talking about the word not in Greek. The word not, as I've already suggested, has three different forms, and these are ou, ook, and ouch. Now, which of these three forms of ou is used depends upon which letter the word that follows ou begins in. The first form, ou, which we might think of as the basic form of ou, is used if the next word begins in a consonant. So if the word that follows ou begins in a consonant, then the basic form, ou, will be used. However, the second form, ook, will be used if the next word begins in a vowel with a smooth breathing. And the final form, ouch, will be used if the next word begins in a vowel with a rough breathing. So that is when each of these three forms of ou is used. Now I should mention that when I say if the next word begins in a vowel, that might be an individual vowel or a diphthong. I'm speaking about vowel sounds in general, so it could be one vowel, but it could also be a diphthong. Anyway, you might still wonder, why does this rule exist? Why are there three different forms of ou that are used in these different situations? And the most straightforward answer to that is because the language sounds nicer and is easier to pronounce this way. Because if you only had the basic form, ou, then you would end up with ou going directly next to a word that begins with a vowel or diphthong. And there you would get a nasty sounding and tough to pronounce combination of different vowel sounds. Whereas by sticking a consonant, either kappa or chi, on the end of ou when the next word begins in a vowel, then it both sounds nicer and is easier to pronounce than if you just had ou. To illustrate, if you've got ook and then the next word beginning in a vowel with a smooth breathing, then there's a very clear distinction between the word ook and the next word which opens in a vowel with a smooth breathing. But you might still wonder, why is ouch with a chi at the end used if the next word begins in a vowel with a rough breathing? And the answer to that is, chi is an aspirated consonant. It is the aspirated version of kappa. That is to say, it is the version of kappa that has more breath behind it. Kappa is an unaspirated K sound, while chi is an aspirated K sound. Kappa sounds like k, chi sounds like k. And in ancient Greek in general, if it is possible for aspiration, that breathiness, to spread from one letter to another, then it will. And in particular, this happens when a letter which has an aspirated counterpart, like kappa does, for example, is followed by an aspirated letter. That is, a letter with some aspiration, whether this is theta or phi, which are aspirated consonants, or an aspirated vowel, which is a vowel or diphthong, I should say, with a rough breathing, with that sound at the start. So when ook meets with a word that begins in a vowel with a rough breathing, then that sound spreads onto the kappa and makes it into a chi, which is k, and that makes the aspiration exist at the end of one word and the beginning of the next. So it acts as kind of a bridge between the two words. Anyway, we'll see this more when we look at some examples. But please do pause the video and make sure you have noted down these 3 different forms of the word u and when each of them is used. Now that you've done that, the next thing that I want to tell you is about the position of the word u, meaning not. Like I said, it can mean something else, but its main meaning is not, and that is the one that we are focusing on right now. And I want to tell you that this word usually goes right before the word that it negates. That is to say, the word that the not applies to. So if you want to say that an action is not happening, then the word not will usually go directly before the verb. And in this lesson, it will be before the verb in every instance. Let's now look at some examples of the word not in action. Here is the sentence "Ho despotes ton doulon udidaske." This is a beloved sentence of ours, but with a plot twist. Namely, it has the word u before the verb didaske. So to go through it, the master is the subject. We know that from the definite article. So the master's doing the action. And the action is didaske. Namely, he, she, it teaches. And we know who the he, she, it is because we've been told it's the master. The master's in the nominative case. But here, the plot twist, as I said, is that we've got this word u before didaske, and u means not. And therefore, this means the master does not teach or is not teaching. It could be either because it's present tense. It can either be does that thing or is doing that thing. But in this case, since it's involving u, it's does not do that thing or is not doing that thing. And then the direct object, as indicated by the definite article, is the slave. And therefore, this sentence is, the master does not teach or is not teaching the slave. And I've put the translation on the screen for you there. The master is not teaching the slave, or the master does not teach the slave. And you can see that we've used the form u rather than uk or uch, because the next word begins in delta, which is a consonant. Since a consonant is used, the word u is used, the basic form. Let's now look at a sentence which uses another form of u. Here is the sentence, "Ho despotes ton doulon uk apokteine." Here, the master is once again the subject, which we know from the definite article. And here, at the end, we've got uk apokteine. We know uk is not, and apokteine is he, she, it, kills or is killing. We know who that he is. We know it's the master, since we have the master in the nominative. So it's the master does not kill or is not killing. And since ton is masculine accusative singular, we know that the slave is the object. The direct object, I should say. So, it's the master is not killing the slave. Or the master does not kill the slave. You can see I put there, the master is not killing the slave. And in this sentence, we had the word uk rather than u or uch. And that is because, if we look at the next word, the verb apokteine, it begins in a vowel with a smooth breathing. If the next word begins in a vowel with a smooth breathing, then uk is used. Let's now look at an example using the last form of u. And here is that sentence. "Ho despotes ton doulon uch horai." The master is once again the subject, which we know from the definite article. At the end here, we've got uch Uch is not, and horai is he, she, or it sees. And we know that the slave is once again the direct object from ton. And so this sentence is, the master does not see the slave. And I've put that on the screen for you. The master does not see the slave. And in this sentence, we had the word uch used because the next word, horai, begins in a vowel with a rough breathing. And so that aspiration that's contained within the rough breathing, that sound, spreads onto what would ordinarily be uk. And the word uk becomes uch, with an aspirated consonant at the end instead. But if you have a smooth breathing, as in the case of the second sentence, then there is no aspiration to spread, and thus, if you have a vowel with a smooth breathing following the word u, then you simply get uk rather than uch. So you can see these three examples here, illustrating the principle that u is used if the next word begins in a consonant, uk is used if the next word begins in a vowel or diphthong with a smooth breathing, and uch is used if the next word begins in a vowel or diphthong with a rough breathing. Having learned this, it's now time for you to put your knowledge into practice. So on the screen we have exercise 1. Here there are 5 sentences, some of which use the negative u, which may appear as either u, uk, or uch. So look at each sentence carefully in order to determine whether it has that word not in it. And the final thing to note is that there is one word which is underlined, and I've given you the definition of that word in its dictionary form in the word bank. Please pause the video and have a go at translating these 5 sentences into English. Okay, we're now going to talk through these sentences. The first one was Chodoulos uk apotneiske. You should have translated this sentence as the slave is not dying or the slave does not die. We knew that it meant this because the slave is in the nominative as indicated by the definite article, and then after the phrase the slave we had uk apotneiske. We know that uk means not, and apotneiske is he, she, it, dies or is dying. And we know who that he is, we know it's the slave. So, this was the slave is not dying, or the slave does not die. It was uk rather than u or uch, because this following word, apotneiske, begins in a vowel with a smooth breathing. The second one was choneanias ten epistolean perei. This should have been translated as the young man is carrying the letter, or the young man carries the letter. There was no negative in this sentence. We didn't have u, uk, or uch. We knew that it meant this because the young man, choneanias, is in the nominative, as indicated by the definite article, and we can find the action he's doing in the verb perei. Perei means he, she, or it carries or is carrying. And then we had ten epistolean, which is the letter, in the accusative, as indicated by the definite article, and so we know that the letter must be the direct object. It's the thing being carried. And that's why we need to translate this as the young man carries, or is carrying, the letter. I've put the numbers there to illustrate the order that we translate this sentence in light of the cases of the nouns. Number 3 was to biblion hoi didaskaloi uch heuriskousin. This should have been translated as the teachers do not find the book, or the teachers are not finding the book. We know that it means this because hoi is masculine nominative plural, and so the teachers, hoi didaskaloi, must be doing the action. And then at the end we had heuriskusin. We know that is not, and in the word bank we had the verb heuriskur, meaning I find. But here it was heuriskusin because the teachers are the ones doing the action. So it's in the third person plural they form, because a group of people from a third person perspective are doing the action. And then that leaves to biblion. To biblion, out of context, could be either nominative or accusative, singular, but in context, because we already have a nominative, namely the teachers, to biblion has to be accusative. And in this sentence, it is the direct object. It is the thing not being found. So we need to take this sentence as the teachers do not find or are not finding the book. And the reason that was used here, ending in a kai, was because the following word, heuriskusin, begins in a diphthong with a rough breathing. Number 4 was tous doulos us dertor. This should have been translated as I am not looking for the slaves, or I am not seeking the slaves. Or I do not look for the slaves, I do not seek the slaves. Any of those would have been fine. We know that it means this because tous doulos is accusative plural, as indicated by the masculine accusative plural definite article tous. And then at the end we had us dertor. U means not, and sdertor is I seek, I am seeking, I look for, or I am looking for. We know that I am doing it from the person ending, or, which is contracted with the epsilon at the end of the verb's stem. Notice that we had no nominative noun or pronoun here. We had to get that I am doing the action from the person ending or. So we knew that it meant I am not looking for the slaves. Okay, and then number 5 was taxiper lambane hoxenos. This should have been translated as the foreigner is taking the swords, or the stranger is taking the swords. Or alternatively, the foreigner takes the swords, or the stranger takes the swords. We know that it means this because the foreigner, or the stranger, is in the nominative, as indicated by the definite article. In the middle, we have the verb lambane, which is he, she, it takes, but we know who's doing the taking, namely the foreigner, or the stranger. So the foreigner takes, or is taking, ta xiper. We know that it must be the swords rather than just the sword, because of the fact that ta is neuter accusative plural, rather than neuter accusative singular. If it were neuter accusative singular, it would be to, but neuter accusative plural is ta. I know that xiper might have been a bit difficult to recognise without having learned how nouns change their endings yet, but I hope that you spotted the xip part and recognised which word it was a form of. And I now have another exercise for you. And this exercise is more than just translation, okay? Here, I would like you to fill in the blanks with the correct form of u for each sentence. And then after filling in the blank with the correct form of u, I would like you to translate that sentence. Okay, so for each sentence, state the correct form of u that should go in the blank space, and then translate the sentence. So, with you doing this at home, you can either write out the full sentence in Greek with the correct form of u in the blank space, or you can just state which form of u would go in the blank. But in any case, after doing that, please translate the sentence also. And take note that there is a definite article and noun phrase which is underlined. There you can find the dictionary form of that noun in the word bank. Please now pause the video and have a go at filling in the blanks and translating these sentences. Let's now talk through these sentences. The first one was ton dulon blank horomen. Because horomen begins in a vowel with a rough breathing, we knew that we had to put in the blank. And you should have translated this sentence as, we do not see the slave. Horomen is we do not see, and ton dulon is the slave in the accusative singular as indicated by the masculine accusative singular definite article ton. Number 2 was ten epistolern blank grapor. Here, because grapor begins in gamma, which is a consonant, we knew that the negative, the word not, had to be u. And you should have translated this sentence as, I am not writing the letter, or I do not write the letter. Because grapor is I am not writing, or I do not write, and ten epistolern is the letter in the accusative singular as indicated by the feminine accusative singular definite article. Number 3 was toxipos blank eche. Here, the verb begins in epsilon with a smooth breathing, and for that reason we know that the negative has to be uk. And you should have translated the sentence as, he, she or it does not have the sword, or he, she or it is not holding the sword. Or alternatively, he, she or it does not hold the sword. We didn't actually have a nominative noun or pronoun, so we had to get it from the person ending a, which is the he, she or it person ending. So uk eche was he, she or it does not have, or does not hold, or is not holding, and toxipos was the sword in the accusative singular. Number 4 was blank kleiomen. Because kleiomen begins in a kappa, which is a consonant, the negative has to be u. And you should have translated this sentence as, we do not cry, or we are not crying, we do not weep, or we are not weeping. Any of those 4 translations would have been fine. We had no nominative noun or pronoun and no accusative noun or pronoun. And the reason that we didn't have an accusative noun or pronoun is because this is an intransitive verb, which we learned about in the last lesson. And we knew that the subject was we because of the ending omen, which is the first person plural person ending. So kleiomen on its own is we cry, but here we have the negative u. So it's we do not cry, or we are not crying. Finally, number 5 was tois angelois blank legusin choineaniai. Here, the word following the form of u begins in lambda, which is a consonant, and therefore the form of u that we should have used is in fact u. And you should have translated this sentence as, the young men are not speaking to the messengers, or the young men do not speak to the messengers. We know that it means this because the young men are in the nominative plural, as indicated by the definite article hoi, and then u legusin is they do not speak, or they are not speaking, but we know who that they is, we know it's the young men. So, the young men are not speaking, and tois angelois is the dative plural of angelos. Angelos is a masculine noun, which you could have found down here, meaning messenger. But since it's in the dative plural, and given the context of the verb of speaking, we know it's to the messengers. So the young men are not speaking to the messengers. Now you have actually met the word angelos in these videos before, but I haven't given it as an official noun to learn. And therefore I am now doing that. It is now an official noun that you should know. And as you may have surmised, it does give us the word angel in English. and in fact it was used to mean angel in Greek itself. In Koine Greek, in the New Testament, an angel is referred to using the word angelos. And with that exercise complete, there is just one other thing to note. And the other thing to note is that the word ou can also mean no. So as well as meaning not, ou can be used to mean no. So if you want to say no in ancient Greek, then you need to say ou. And you often find this word ou, meaning no, with an oath, where a speaker swears by a god or gods. And this is to emphasize the degree to which they are saying no. It's to emphasize how passionately they are saying no. So for example, you often see the phrase ou ma dia. Ou ma dia means no by Zeus. Ou means no, and the word ma means by, and dia is the accusative of Zeus. Zeus's name in the nominative is Zeus, but in the accusative it is dia. He has an irregular name, which we shall talk about later on. But essentially the word ma, meaning by, to indicate the person you're swearing by, takes that person in the accusative. Okay, so ma, meaning by, is followed by an accusative. And the reason we have a capital delta here is because Zeus is a proper name. Proper names, that is the names of people, places or groups of people, begin in capital letters. In fact, in edited Greek texts, that is the only place capitals appear outside of the title and author's name at the top of the page, and also character lists at the start of dialogues and such. That's another place capitals are used. But in the actual text itself, you only see capitals used at the start of proper names. And that's why you've got a capital delta there. So that's just an example that you see in Greek texts. You see ou ma dia, which means no by Zeus. And while we're at it, I should tell you what the word for yes is. The word for yes is nai. Nai. So if you want to say yes, you say nai. If you want to say no, you say ou. So, to wrap up the lesson, here is a summary of our learning for lesson 16. We have learned that the word ou, uk, or uch means not or no. Depending on the context, it can mean not or no. And we also learned when to use ou, uk, or uch. We use ou if the next word begins in a consonant, we use uk if the next word begins in a vowel with a smooth breathing, and we use uch if the next word begins in a vowel with a rough breathing. And we also met a couple of new words. We met the noun angelos, which isn't truly new, but it's new as an official word to learn. Anyway, we met angelos, which means messenger, and I forgot to mention that it is a masculine noun. We know that from the definite article ho. Okay, so angelos is masculine. We met angelos, meaning messenger, and we met the verb heuriskor, which is the verb to find. And that about does it for what we learned in this lesson. Please note that the word ou is called the simple negative, but there are also words called compound negatives, which we shall learn about in a future lesson. But that is all for this lesson. So I would like to say thank you very much for watching and for all of the support. Please click or tap the like button if this lesson was useful, and please leave a comment if you wish to leave any feedback. I have once again put an ancient Greek frog on the screen to brighten your day. But for now, I must say goodbye and that I shall see you again next time.